All right. This is the last session for today. Hopefully everybody comes back in 2 weeks because they're having so much fun on a Saturday morning. But I just want to finish up with the point from the last session, and that is the issue of the innovator against the conservative society. Notice that Roark and Cameron and Roark in the story, architecture is a good vehicle for Ayn Rand to present her theme, because in real life, of course, the struggle of the modern architects, the Louis Sullivans, the Frank Lloyd Wrights, to get their new ideas accepted in society, and the architects. I mean, just here we are in New York City. It's perfect. The architects have, like Howard Roark says, they've in many cases literally transfigured the structures on this earth in terms of the beautiful, to build skyscrapers like this and buildings like that that are both beautiful and functional. So they've had an enormous benefit in human life, and of course they had a struggle in many cases to have their visions adopted. So the innovators, of course, are the independent thinkers, clearly, and then the entrenched society, the conservative beliefs show people are not too willing very often to try on the new ideas, to try out the new ideas, and they are dependent on the way things have been done in the past. I see a hand.
I wonder if Ayn Rand is, or if this idea of independence is so opposed to conservatism, if it necessitates going against what's entrenched because the world is constantly changing. How is it that for a free society to exist, in reality you need a basis of conservatism. You need to keep some sort of allegiance to laws. You need to have a system which was established long ago, to which you have to maintain a certain allegiance. Otherwise, the society will crumble. An example is the United States Constitution. How does Ayn Rand's philosophy account for that?
Well, okay, that's a good question too. The question is, say, without conservatism, without the allegiance to or obedience to institutions that have been set up long ago, how would you have civil society? You would be no obedience to laws, and civil society would crumble. Well, I think Ayn Rand's point is, you mentioned the U.S. Constitution, which is a perfect example. The reason for allegiance to the U.S. Constitution or the basic laws of a free society is not because they're old, it's because they're rational. It's because they promote human life on earth regardless of their age. I mean, 1790, it was new, but it was just as, it still needed to be, people still, if they want to live well on earth, they still needed to have allegiance to the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution, because it gave us the protection of individual rights that we needed. So it's not the question of its age is immaterial. The question is whether it promotes human life on earth or does not. The conservatives, if that term has any meaning, what it means is to be a traditionalist. Is you go with the things that are old. You see it in religion. It's very easy to slip into, well, you can't eat meat with dairy, or you can't eat pork, or you can't eat fish on Friday. Where did these come from? I mean, at one time, maybe they were rationally based, maybe they weren't. But I suppose for the Jews and the Muslims, the prohibitions on pork back then was rational. That is, it was harder to treat pork or cure it. Today, pork's no more dangerous to you than beef, but the prohibitions remain. It's because the traditionalists, of course, hold on to it because it's old, not because it's rational, not because it promotes human life. So I think that's the key point here. Conservatism, if it means traditionalism, is simply a way of consigning your mind to the traditions of the past, to following people of the past. Now, a point I want to make here about the innovators is the innovators are generally geniuses, which is necessary to have new ideas, new theories, new methods, etc. These are the people who change the world. But notice that independence is not limited to genius, and Ayn Rand has a character in this story whose function is to dramatize that point. Who's the character who's as independent as anybody, as Roark? He's just not as smart as Roark. And that's Mike Donegan, the construction worker. Independence doesn't mean you have to be a genius. If you're going to change the world, you have to be a genius. But independence means regardless of your level of intelligence, whether you're whether you're brilliant or just garden variety intelligent or very modest intelligence, what it means to be independent is to use whatever degree of intelligence you have to think, to not follow others blindly, but to be a thinker. Notice Mike Donegan, who's a construction worker. He's not going to design revolutionary new structures the way Roark is. But notice that Mike is as independent as Roark. That is, society generally claims that Henry Cameron was a bum and Guy Franken was a top architect. And Mike just rejects that. He knows better. Henry Cameron was a great architect, and Guy Franken was, what do you call him, pretty boy, teaches, patsies, contemptuous, of these guys. And similarly, society at this point, embraces Peter Keating as a top architect and rejects Howard Roark. And Mike Donegan knows better. He could see with his own eyes and understand with his own mind what makes a good building. He maybe can't design new types of buildings, new structures, but he's a builder, and he loves building. He understands buildings when he sees them. And he goes with his own mind here, regardless of what society believes. That's what it means to be independent. Now, if on top of that you also happen to be brilliant, then you could do revolutionary things. And I think the Mike Donegans, notice his gratitude towards Roark, his respect of Roark. Same way Eddie Willers is in Atlas Shrugged, same character. Eddie Willers is not as brilliant as Dagny Taggart, John Galt, Hank Reardon, Ed Al, but he's just as rational. He's just as committed to human life on this earth. And in both stories, Mike Donegan in The Fountainhead and Eddie Willers in Atlas Shrugged, these are the best of every man. They're not intellectual giants, but they're moral giants. And notice, as part of their moral stature, notice the respect they have for the geniuses who make life on earth better. Notice the gratitude they have for the Roarks and the Dagnys and the Galts. So an important point here is Ayn Rand's books focus on the great men and women who carry us forward. That is the intellectual as well as the moral giants. But the key point about being a human being is not how smart am I, how good looking am I, how strong am I, how athletic am I, or anything like that. It's how moral am I? What is my character? And that is in each and every individual's direct control. What kind of brain I have is something I'm born with. What kind of athleticism or musical talent I have may be something I'm born with. But my character, the most important thing about me, is in my direct volitional control. It's up to my choices and my actions. And Mike Donegan establishes that by virtue of being just as independent as Roark is. All right. Now, there's another way in which Ayn Rand dramatizes her theme. The theme of independence versus dependence. We'll go through it, at any number of levels. We've seen the conformist, the nonconformist, the individualist. We've seen the innovator's struggle against a conservative society. Let's go deeper. I mean, Ayn Rand, I think, makes, in The Fountainhead, even though Atlas Shrugged is her best book, and Atlas Shrugged is the most philosophical of her books, I think, of anybody's books, in my judgment, Ayn Rand introduces a revolutionary point in moral philosophy in The Fountainhead, and that is her turning upside down of the selfishness, selflessness issue. And brilliantly dramatized in the context of the story. Conventionally, Peter Keating would be looked at as the paradigm example of a selfish type. He'll lie, cheat, steal, practically murder poor old Lucius Heyer in order to get to the top of corporate America, right? In order to get, he's on the fast track to commercial success, and he'll do anything to gain commercial success. So conventionally, he'd be looked at as selfish. Now, Roark, on the other hand, who holds true to moral principles, to him the integrity of his designs, part of his own integrity, the integrity of his design is of more importance than how much money he makes or how much recognition he gains. Obviously, he wants to make money, doesn't give his designs away, expects to get paid. He has to support himself. So it's important to make money, but not by betraying his character, not by betraying the integrity of his designs. So Roark, who turns down when he's starving, he's got like $12 left in the bank, and has to close his office and go work at a granite quarry, and not knowing he's going to meet Dominique Francon there either, turns down a major commission in the heart of New York City in order to stand by a moral principle. He calls that, anyway, conventionally, he would be viewed as a selfless person, right? Sacrifices have to be made if you're going to, be true to moral principles. He would be viewed as the selfless one. And Ayn Rand completely reverses that and gives a revolutionary analysis of why Roark is the one who's selfish and Keating is the one who's selfless, and then ties that back to her theme of independence versus dependence. So let's build up to that in the last segment today and discuss that today. Notice that part one of the Fountainhead is a contrast between Peter Keating and Howard Roark. I mean, they go to Stanton at the same time, use very different methods on how to study. Right? Roark actually masters the material. Keating kisses up to his professors, or gets Roark to do his work. They leave Stanton at the same time. Did not say graduate, but they leave Stanton at the same time. Keating graduates with high honors. Roark's expelled. They come down to New York City at the same time, seeking commercial success in the field of architecture. And they go to work for very different people. At the same time, Keating at Franken's and Roark at Cameron's. We already discussed that. Now notice that them MOs, briefly, before we get to the big climactic scene at the end of part one. Notice their MOs. Keating comes in, let's do Keating first. Keating comes into Franken's. And the uppermost question in his mind, perhaps the exclusive question in his mind, is not, what can I learn here to make myself a better architect? The uppermost question in his mind is, who can I manipulate? What weakness do these guys have that I can use against them to climb the ladder? Keating very much on the premise of, it's not what you know that counts, it's who you know that counts. He manipulates first Tim Davis, Franken's draftsman. What was Davis's weakness? Was he was going to get married, right? And so I got to plan the wedding and everything. So Keating does the drafting work for him at like half the price, and Franken eventually supplants him. Keating then sets his sights on Claude Stangl, the head designer at Franken's. Stangl, unfortunately for Keating, sees through him, but Stangl has a characteristic that Keating can use against him as well. Namely, Stangel's ready to go out on his own. He just needs somebody to stake him. Franken trusts him with some account. Keating wines and dines them, talks about these great artists who go unappreciated, who they do the work and somebody else takes the credit, and says, Stangl really does the design, but Franken takes the credit. I didn't say it. And he gets them all fired up, and they hire Stangl. And Stangl leaves the firm, and Franken goes, that lousy Stangl, I staked him, I gave him all of his jobs, I made him what he is, and what does he do? He betrays me and runs off with his commissions. What a rotten guy. And Keating says, well, guy, some people, you just can't trust them. Keating's pretty good at what he does. I mean, he's a triple A manipulator. He's not Ellsworth Toohey. Ellsworth Toohey's like Hall of Fame, but he's high, Keating's high minor leagues. Then of course he wants to be partner in the firm, and he sets his sights on Lucius Hire. All this time he's been kissing up to Hire because Hire is a partner, and he studies porcelain. If Keating spent as much time, studying architecture as he does learn how to play badminton or learning porcelain or stuff, he might not. Actually, if he hadn't given up painting and spent as much time studying painting, he might have been a